Congratulations to the winners of the Connecticut Scholastic Writing Awards. I am Lizzy Rockwell, and it is my honor to welcome you to this celebration. I also welcome the teachers, parents, friends, and mentors who have inspired you on your journey. And because I'm a children's book author and illustrator, I'm going to use some images to go with the words that I share with you today. To be recognized for your excellence in writing at such a young age is impressive. Even more impressive is the courage you have mustered. It doesn't just take courage to submit your work for review, it takes courage to mark the blank page. I know because I'm a little terrified each time I do this. You took your thoughts, which were like nuggets of ore wedged in the dark folds of your brain, and brought them into the light. But in order for those nuggets to be useful, they had to be changed. You decided to make that change. To change iron ore into steel is called smelting. What you did with your nuggets is called writing. Once thoughts and feelings are transformed into words, they become something entirely new, something that can be saved, and if you choose, something that can be shared. Words are precious and powerful. Last July, I became a grandmother to baby Kai. It is my profound privilege to love him and watch him grow. At first, he was either content and silent or uncomfortable and vocal. His first attention-getting sounds were complaints. 8-day-old Kai was clearly looking and listening. Babies use their senses to collect vital information. Faces are some of the first patterns a baby can recognize. They start to recognize voices by their tone. 8-month-old Kai has discovered that his voice is a true asset. Now he bubbles with laughter, he hums with pleasure, and growls with dissatisfaction. He has begun to put his lips together to make favorite syllables like brr, gra, and moi. He now turns his head when he hears his name. When Kai sits on a lap to read a book, he points to the shapes and words on the page. He sometimes swings his head around to study the shape the reader's mouth makes as it forms the words. Soon he will connect those sounds to those shapes on the page and in his real world. He will soon speak those words to advocate for himself, to make friends, tell stories, and express big ideas. In about 4 years, he will learn to decode those mysterious black marks into words. One day, like this preschooler, he will begin to write them down. I am a writer. I get paid to put my thoughts, feelings, and observations into words. I still find this a little odd to say. This is because I came to writing through drawing. Like any child lucky enough to go to school, I was asked to write stuff all the time. But I was always grateful when there was a picture involved. I could explain things better with a picture. In college, I was a fine art and art history major. If I was going to write without pictures, I wanted to at least write about pictures. During our final exams, 2 images would be projected on the screen. In 20 minutes, you had to write down every fact you knew about those pictures, like the artist, the place, the year. Then you analyzed the ways the 2 pictures were alike and different. How did looking at one give you a better understanding of the other? It turned out I was good at synthesis and comparison, and I liked the challenge of taking complex information and boiling it down to its essence. But back then, I did not think I would ever be a writer. I thought I might be an abstract painter, or maybe a teacher of art history. But those seemed like long paths to making a living and paying rent on an apartment in New York City, where I longed to begin my grown-up life. So I decided to train to be an illustrator. My parents, Ann and Harlow Rockwell, were both painters and illustrators who worked at home my whole life. So this was a job I could envision. My mom was a writer and illustrator of picture books. There are 200 books in the Library of Congress with her name on them. She wrote many books that my father illustrated. She did not go to college or ever take a writing or illustration class. She could write a simple concept book, a biography, retellings of folk tales, and original stories. In the beginning of my career, I illustrated book jackets and magazines. I had no plans to illustrate picture books, much less write them. When my father died in 1988, I was 26. He and my mom had created a series about the seasons. He died before he illustrated the final book about autumn. My mom asked the publisher if they would let me illustrate it in his place. They hesitated and then said yes. My first book, Apples and Pumpkins, was illustrated in my dad's style, using his character and rough sketches that my mom had drawn for him as she wrote the words. During our 30-year-long collaboration, my mom and I created 19 books together, which she wrote and I illustrated. These are some of them. Because she was an artist, my mom always wrote with a picture in mind. So to illustrate her text was not exactly easy, but it was a great way to learn. I learned that words and illustrations in picture books do not step on each other's toes or mimic each other. They are two individuals in a dance, each with their own essential part. After illustrating about 9 books by my mom and other authors, I got the idea that I wanted to write one. Hey, picture books are short. All sorts of people write them. Movie stars write them. Even my own mom can write them. It turned out it was not as easy as it looked. One of my editors, Nancy Sisko, encouraged me to try. I had worked with her illustrating for a science series. I wanted to write a science book. She showed me a list of topics they were planning to cover, and one was food and nutrition. I was immediately drawn to that. Full disclosure, I was not that interested in nutrition. I was interested in science and food, and I loved to cook. But my children would gleefully discover a Fluffernutter, a juice box, and a bag of chips once in a while in their lunchbox in the 1990s. But hey, how hard could it be to brush up on the facts and write an interesting and engaging picture book on the subject? I started with the research. I piled the reference books high in my library cubicle. There were stacks of books for adults on the subject, but in 1995, not one picture book. One fact came through loud and clear. The United States was on the precipice of a childhood obesity epidemic. The topic, it turned out, was not just interesting, but important. But what child would want to read a list of illustrated facts and figures about nutrition of all topics? Not my 2 kids, who were 3 and 6 at the time. Not me when I was a kid. I was going to have to melt down those nuggets of ore and turn them into something useful. But what did I even want my useful object to be? Where to begin? I worked as much as I could in libraries when I had a young family. My studio was in the garage of our suburban rental duplex. I love libraries, and I especially love libraries that have cafes. My local library had a good one. As I sat struggling with my writer's block, I got a headache. I felt cranky. I got bored and distracted. Clearly, my brain's battery had drained down to about 3%. And then, as low points often provide, I had a breakthrough. The opening line seemed to bleed out of my pen. Babies cry when they're hungry. And just as importantly, it was a line that could partner with an attention-getting and humorous picture. As a mom and former kid, I knew my readers would relate. The theme of my book was born. Hunger sends you strong signals, because eating is the most important thing you do each day. Over the next few years, I did 5 text revisions on this book. I sketched 3 entirely different book dummies. I tried 3 different titles, but the opening line never changed. And once you start, you can likely finish. I remind myself of this over and over again. Every start seems impossible, until it isn't. Since that first book, I have written 9 others. I've written more books about child wellness. I've written several books about our natural world. another subject area which is not just interesting, but important. The Altogether Quilt, which came out in 2021, was another long gestation. It's about a group of adults and children who make a quilt together and donate it to their library. The characters and events are all drawn from my real life. I've been making quilts with a group of friends in Norwalk, Connecticut for the past 14 years. We meet in a community room every Friday afternoon and make quilts together. Some we keep and some we give away to loved ones. We have made quilts that hang in libraries, just like the characters in the Altogether Quilt. This is a heartwarming and true story about community collaboration. I knew it was a beautiful theme for a picture book, but how could I cram all these characters, all these years, plus an explanation of how a quilt is made, into a 32-page picture book? This time, I knew where to start. I would start with a square, the most versatile shape in quilt design. I cut and folded drawing paper to make a 3-inch square dummy where I would draw my thumbnail sketches. By starting with this shape, I broke the ice of my fear. The characters were elements of a patchwork. The story itself was a metaphor for a quilt. The theme of my book was born. Good things happen when many come together as one. I would start with a square, and once I start, I know it is likely I will finish. So thank you, friends, for joining me today. This was a great celebration, and you should be very proud. You have found your voice and discovered it is a true asset. You have used words to create something that wasn't there before, and something that could be saved and shared. I congratulate you on this special accomplishment, and I hope to hear a lot more from you.